Hey, everybody. This episode of Our Kids Play Hockey is brought to you by our title sponsor, NHL Sense Arena. Look, we all want our kids to succeed in hockey, but let's face it, finding training that's both effective and enjoyable can be a real challenge, and not to mention expensive and a total drain on time, especially if you have to drive to the rink, pay a private instructor. There's so many reasons that money gets spent on this game. But that's where NHL Sense Arena steps in. It's a virtual reality training game that brings the rink into your home that takes off-ice training to a new reality. It's designed to improve hockey sense and IQ, something that's lacking majorly in the game today for both players and goalies. And you get unlimited access to over 100 drills and training plans from top coaches and players that can be played anytime, anywhere, with drills approved by USA Hockey player and goalie development directors. Look, improving mental hockey skills at home has really never been more fun, and any hockey player that uses this is going to have a blast. All right. I've used this before on my own, and it feels like you're so immersed in an arena, you sometimes forget you have a headset on. And again, it's not being on the ice, but it allows you to work on some of these skill sets like scanning, as I said before, hockey IQ, looking around the rink, making the right plays, that getting those repetitions in now as a hockey player are super important for your development. So NHL Sense Arena is giving all the listeners an exclusive offer for $50 off an annual plan when you use our code Hockey Never Stops at checkout. Again, that's Hockey Never Stops. All you got to do is go to hockey.sensearena.com. Again, that's hockey.sensearena.com. Use the code Hockey Never Stops, and you'll save $50 on your annual plan of NHL Sense Arena. Make sure to check that out and enjoy this episode of Our Kids Play Hockey. You know, we're always saying that communication is the most important aspect of how things go good or go bad in hockey. I often say 10 out of 10 problems are caused by poor communication. So we brought our friend in, retired coach from the NCAA, Pete Whitney, to help us discuss the importance of communication all the way from the NCAA level down to the mite level, and how we can implement different things to teach our kids how to be better communicators, and then more importantly, what's expected of them as they get to that NCAA level. When you walk in that locker room, what their coach is expecting. So a lot of great knowledge dropped on this one. It's always great to have Pete Whitney on the episode. Also want to let you know, again, you guys get a really nice discount over at hockeywraparound.com when you use the code OKPH. And know if it's the holiday time when you're listening to this, you're getting a lot of things thrown at you, but our deal with you is year-round. OKPH at hockeywraparound.com. You can check out the world's #1 blade protector, their patented dry stick technology, so you can have a portable drying thing for your gear bag that you can take anywhere you want to go. Really consolidates the room. Or the children's book that Christy and I wrote, When Hockey Stops, is available there as well. It can be personalized. Again, hockeywraparound.com, OKPH at checkout for a 20% discount on your purchase. And you get the good feeling of knowing that you're helping us out over at Our Kids Play Hockey. And with that said, let's dive into this episode with Pete Whitney. Hello, hockey friends and families around the world, and welcome to another edition of Our Kids Play Hockey. Today, topic's going to be really important. Today, we're talking about communication as a skill set. And if you're listening to this at the debut, it is the holiday season. Now, this episode's going to be evergreen. You can listen to this year-round, which means Christmas and Hanukkah in July, in January. Whenever you're listening to this episode, it's going to make sense. But for today's purpose, we're heading into the holidays, where honestly, communication has to be better than at any other point of the season, in my opinion, because the communication you do now mid-season usually tends to help you later on in the season. And helping us with this conversation today, someone we've had on the show multiple times, so I'm not going to do a long introduction. He's one of our favorite guests to have, retired NCAA coach Pete Whitney. Pete, thank you for being here today. 3 times means you get a free Our Kids Play Hockey mug, Pete. Congratulations. That'll be in the mail soon.
I will not allow anyone else in my family to ever drink from that mug.
Well, that's probably good. It's kind of like the Indiana Jones cup at the end. It gives you everlasting hockey life if you have it. At least that's what we're told. That's what they say to sell it to us. But Pete, it's great to have you here today. Again, this is the topic I know we've discussed off of the show before, and we're really going to tap into your knowledge here from the NCAA level, but also how that transcends down all the way down to mite. Because communication, as I said, it's a skill set. And I think that there's a lot of reasons why we're not doing a great job teaching that from a societal level. I also think that there's a lot of finger pointing at younger people when it comes to communication about technology. And we've all said it, hey, you're always on your phone. You're always on your phone. Well, that's the reality of the situation, right? Mike, I'm going to throw it to you first because Mike deals with this stuff all the time. Mike, why don't we just get your general thoughts on communication as a skill set? Let out all the frustration, Mike. Let us know what you think, and let us start this episode with some Mike Benelli.
Communication. So that I'll get accused when I ask my own kids to put the phone down and I have the phone in my hand, that's probably like the red flag of, Dad, maybe you need to put your phone down. You've been on it for 7 hours today. So I think it's so it is there is a cosmic shift in where the perception is, from my point of view, from where working with, like, especially high school kids and youth players, from where they were. Like, I think, kids have always been shy. We've always tried to teach kids to look you in the eye and shake your hand hard. And like, these are things that and then it's even happening more now where, I did a summer hockey school where we had a mandate that the kids put their phones, left them in the locker room during the lunch break so that they'd have to communicate to each other at lunch, like forcibly, and it really, there was a lot of anxiety for kids when we did this, whether they, whether that FOMO kicked in, right, or whether the piece of, they felt so awkward talking to another human being. But again, these are issues that we're creating in our society. And I think there is a backlash, right? I mean, we're seeing it over and over and over again where, like full schools are saying, you got to put your, I went to a comedy concert a week ago, and I had to put my phone in this like lockbox padded phone case, and you couldn't access your phone, at all. Like you couldn't even get to it if, I'm sitting there going, this is so odd. Like, I'm a parent. Like, my kids are with the babysitter. Like, there's no way I can communicate. Like, it was really, that's like it actually took a little bit for me to be like, okay, well, I'll accept this for the next hour and a half. I guess just sitting here and hope that everything's going great. But you know what, Pete, right? I mean, we would have that our whole lives. We just, you'd get in the car and you'd go somewhere and you'd hope that there was a game on the other side of the trip. You wouldn't get a text message and be like,
what did we do before this? Yeah.
What did we do? So it's good and bad. I'm a technology like geek. Like, I don't mind technology. But it is, I find myself all the time using it way too much, for too long, and really in toxic ways that don't help me in my mental state, like watching what other coaches are doing, watching what other players are performing at and the levels they're at. I mean, it's, wondering at, instantly knowing what a score is. So it's, so it really is a challenge, because when adults can't handle it, how do you expect your 9, 10, and 11-year-olds to handle it? And, so it is, I think, to what Pete's always talked about, and even off our shows, is just that you now you have young men and women, adults, that you're trying to re-engage with and teach in this communication piece that I think we've always had that, but it seems like now you have to be purposeful, right, in teaching it.
Sure. And I think one of the things too that I always kind of wonder is it's part of technology in that, but how necessary is it? And I look at that in terms of, I mean, I think we've all gone, maybe it's a short trip. We're going to go from here to the store, which is maybe 4 or 5 miles, and we've left our phone at home. And the first thing is there's this wave of panic that goes over you. That's right. I don't have my phone. And
it's crazy.
Right. And then you take a breath and you say, you know what? I think it's going to be okay. Because today's generation, for sure, and potentially not even yours, has never experienced the joy and utter panic of needing to make a phone call, driving around looking for something that was called a phone booth.
That's right.
Getting to the phone booth,
out of quarters,
opening the door and seeing that someone had ripped the phone off the receiver off the rest of the phone.
Yeah.
So,
or burned it with a lighter or something. Yeah, you can use it, right?
Yes.
So exactly. Why they would do that, I have no idea. But I think you're right. That panic mode of, like, to me, like, I don't even use a wallet anymore. Everything's on my phone. Like, my phone is my lifeline. Like, so if it's like the only thing I remember when I leave the house is like, oh, I gotta have my phone. But I think in the context that we're talking about is not so much like the benefits of having the phone, because your 12-year-old doesn't need the phone. Like they don't need directions. They don't need the update on the game. They don't need, they don't need to have the phone. Like where I could make a pretty good excuse that I need to have my phone. I'm more important than you 12-year-old or 15-year-old. Like I need it. But for the kids, and I think I'm honestly when we started coming up with this subject and I started reflecting, I had the same issues with high school players back in 1990.
Right. Right.
And not talking in the locker room and not using their voice to express their thought. And because a lot of it was like, I mean, think about the way a lot of us grew up, with coaches, like very authoritative. You do it the way I tell you to do it. Shut your mouth, get your job done, get in, get out, and go home. Where, there wasn't that, now we're begging kids to communicate with us.
Right.
And before it was like, I don't want you communicating with me. You have no say in this.
So I'll make a few points here. All right. Number one is that I'm a big believer that things are always changing, but things are always the same, right? The problems within humanity have existed for all of humanity. It's just the environment in which they live often changes. And I think that the first step to solving any problem is always admitting that there is a problem, right? And here's the truth of this situation for all the hockey parents listening. I'd say most hockey parents are Gen X, millennials, or Xennials, for those of you in that small little generation, right? That's where the parents are right now. And we have all grown up with this technology. So it's not the kids, it's all of us, right? I can't tell you how many times I've been at my kitchen table and my daughter and my son will come up to me and I kind of have to tell myself, Lee, you're on your phone. Get off your phone. Like I'm just as guilty of this at times as other people. So I think the first step is kind of realizing, look, we all do this, right? To different levels. And I always say that as a parent, it's really on me to first off be conscious if I'm doing that. It's very easy to zone out when your kids are talking complete nonsense to you to stay on your phone, right? But I realize that if I stay on my phone and keep looking at my phone while they're talking to me, I am just teaching them to do the exact same thing. So I actually very visibly put my phone down and say, okay, please tell me that you have my full attention. So parents, I think it's really important to do that. The other thing too is that, and this is the funny part about it, Mike and Pete, Mike, you said it too, like that we've always had a hard time getting kids to communicate. Technically speaking, literally and figuratively, kids are better at communicating now than they ever have been in the history of mankind. They just do it through text or through different methods, right? When we were kids, we didn't have the option to do that. If you were a shy kid, you were a shy kid. You might have lost yourself in books or a CD Walkman or a cassette player. Or if you really want to go back, an 8-track, we probably have a few members of the audience who know that one, right? But there's always an escapism thing. Now, this is what I want to do in the episode, okay? Breaking this down now to hockey. We're bringing it back. We're bringing it back to the hockey. We're going to start at the NCAA level. Pete, I'm going to ask you, what is your expectation of an NCAA athlete's ability to communicate? And parents, what I want you to do is listen and understand, okay, that's kind of the standard we're trying to get to. Then we're going to reverse back through the age groups and talk about some actionable items you can probably start doing with those kids at those ages to get them to that NCAA level, really a professional level of communication. It doesn't have to be NCAA, right? So, Pete, we're walking into your locker room. It's an NCAA team. I'm a freshman, right? A 21-year-old freshman because I played prep school, all right? What are you expecting from me as an athlete and a student, right? Student athlete, I had to reverse that, from a communication standpoint.
Well, I think first and foremost, if I come in there, we've obviously had conversations way prior to that, but when I come in, I expect your phone, because I'll tell you, 9 out of 10 times you're going to be on your phone. So I expect you to put your phone down, right? Look up when you see me come in the room, and because I'm gonna greet you and I want to see how things are going and how your day has been and how classes were. How was the lunch that day? How was your family? All those types of conversations. And I expect to be able to have an actual conversation with you based on you hopefully knowing that I've created a relationship with you where I'm asking you the questions because I actually care about who you are as a human being. I mean, one of the things that I've been fortunate to do, I think, is having been in this game for an extended amount of time, is I've seen the days where kids you'd walk in the locker room and guys would kind of like turn their head and say, I hope he doesn't make eye contact. I'm going to pretend like I'm tying my laces, anything, so I don't have to communicate because I don't want to get yelled at. Because that's how it used to be way back when. It was my way or the highway,
Right.
kind of thing. And
Wasn't that long ago.
it's so much more. Maybe. Today it's so much more fun to me as a coach. That's one of the things I truly miss. I miss sitting down and saying, just what we were talking about. How was class today? You
Right.
know, one boy I knew was so excited that he was an uncle. It was the first time he was ever an uncle. This was 2 years ago.
That's cool.
And it was
Yeah.
great that he can't coach. How's it going today, coach? Uh, my brother and his wife had their baby. I'm an uncle. I'm an uncle. We got a little boy. We got a future post-university hockey player, coach. But just him being comfortable enough to have that type of a conversation
Right.
was really important to me. And then to see them have conversations amongst each other.
Right.
That to me that's key. When I walk in a room, I don't care what they're talking about, as long as they're, hopefully not on their phone, but sometimes they are, because the reality is that's how they communicate.
Right.
So to tell them, no, you can't do that. There are situations where you don't want them to do that. You prefer them to use another method to communicate.
Right.
But I don't think you can't take that away from them, because that's the way it is today. So
Well,
if you're going to grow as a coach, you have to morph and understand that and know how that works. And I mean, we had group texts, which were great because we knew it was how guys got them. And I did have to make the rule that you do something simple, like I think at that time there were 26 players on the team. I said, when I send out something on the group text, I expect 26 likes.
right.
You don't have to respond. You don't have to you come back with anything. You don't have to type anything.
Acknowledge.
Hit
Yeah.
the like button, acknowledge the fact that you saw what I was sending you, because you send the message that we're a group, we're a team, and what you're saying is important. I get it.
But isn't the point too that you're making, that there's a big difference between the kids communicating and looking at each other's phones and comparing YouTube videos and the night before's highlights, than 26 players all in their stalls with their heads down looking and not associating with each other, right? So there's a
100%.
use of that technology and that communication, that the phone is not the piece that, like, I'm against. It's the phone being the crutch to
Yeah.
put you in a
Division.
place where you're not communicating with other human beings anymore and your teammates, because in a forget about everything else, we're in a team sport. I mean, the fact that we need kids to get to know each other on a whole different level, supporting each other and being cheerleaders for each other, takes human contact.
Right. And Mike, I think, and Pete, tell me if I'm wrong. The key to what I just took out of that is a couple things. One is that there's nothing against the technology. There's nothing against the people. We expect high levels of efficient communication at this level, right? That however you choose to communicate, it needs to be done in an efficient way that's going to be best for the team. And also utilizing the technology. And I'll say this as a coach, man, group texts are one of the greatest advancements of technology history for a coach. I can tell you right now, like, I stay in touch with teams abroad through group text. So it's a wonderful technology. But the other key that you said, and I don't want anybody to miss this, is that as a coach, and this is a two-way thing, it is so important nowadays to create that environment with your players where they can feel comfortable talking to you, high levels of trust, high levels of what Pete said. I actually do care about you. I'd like to know about your day, right? Coaches are taking steps to do that, but again, two-way conversation. For the parents listening, your children also have to have the ability to have that conversation back. And it's very, very important that when you have that conversation and Pete says to you, hey, how was your weekend? You don't just go, good. Oh, how's your family doing? Good. That's not what you want, right? You want to have there's a term, conversationalist, right? Now, I'm not saying that a introvert has to jump up and have a 15-minute conversation with you. That's kind of on the coach to understand the personality of the player. But if you want to create, and we talk about this all the time in team building, guys, if you want to create the environment where winning can take place, this is a big part of it. Trust needs to exist. You have to be able to know your players and what motivates them. Pete, I'm just like you. I generally care about my players. Now, that is a separate thing from how I decide the lineup, right? But I generally
Absolutely.
care. And I think when there's an understanding of that, not only is it easier to understand the lineup situation, but I think you put yourself as a player in a better position to be part of the team.
Right. And a phrase that I'm sure you guys have all many people listening, I'm sure have used it too, is we can agree to disagree. You
Right.
may come in and talk about, why am I playing, not playing? Why am I not on the power play? Why whatever? Why am I not in the last 5 minutes of the game? I'm going to explain to you what you need to do to get there.
Right.
And if we create that level of communication where I care about you, I'm not just giving you a line. I'm actually giving you something concrete to work on that could potentially put you in that position to where you can get there. And let's see if you can get there. And I want you to get there
Right.
because if you can get there, you make somebody else better. And if you make that player better, that makes somebody else better. And before you know it, we're all better.
Now, pro tip for everybody listening. I love, Pete, what you just said. This is something I'm seeing now with younger people that I don't think I would have dared to do when I was a younger person, right? Coach gives you very direct feedback on what he or she wants you to do to succeed on their team and their lineup. And I have seen too many people just disagree, not agree to disagree, just disagree. There is a real value. I'm telling parents and players, listen to me. There is a real value in a coach telling you what he or she wants. They're literally giving you the answer, right? And assuming they're honorable people, because I do understand sometimes there's yes men and yes women who just say whatever you want to hear. But Pete is a very honorable person. It is a gift when you get a coach that tells you directly what you want. You might not like the way they said it to you. You might not like what the message is. But just like the real world, when someone says you want to get from A to Z, here's the path. You just kind of have to nod your head and say thank you. And you can, Pete, I know you can probably have a conversation with you about this, but you're going to, as you said, you might agree to disagree. That is part of communication as a skill, is understanding this is the way the conversation goes. All of society could benefit from this type of methodology, by the way, right? There's too many of us.
That's a point too, that it's really important. You make that point with the player. Like I say to the player, listen, when we leave this meeting, we may agree to disagree.
Right.
You have your opinion, I have mine, but this is where I feel you need to be. This is what you need to do to get where you want to go. Do with that information as you will, because you have free choice. I can't make you do anything,
Right.
but it's okay for you to leave here saying,
Right.
I don't know that I don't know if I really agree with that. And then maybe you think about it more. We can have another conversation, and maybe you sway me a little bit, or
Right.
like I'm always happy to talk about it, because I feel like there's situations in life, and there should not be problems. Problems to me stem from situations that we're not dealt with.
Right. And for those of you listening, again, if you haven't heard Pete's episodes, Pete is a incredibly honorable man and a great coach. And I think one of the reasons you have had success, Pete, is because of the way hey, the door's open. Let's talk about it at the right time in the right way. But I'm always here to talk to you. There's too many coaches out there still that I don't think are allowing for those conversations. It's a very my way or the highway attitude. And don't get me wrong, coaches, there's a time sometimes like, hey, the conversation's over. This is where we're at. But you have to have that ability to be open. Now, let's rewind back. We're talking about the NCAA. High levels of efficient communication is expected that the young athletes will be able to walk in the locker room, have a conversation with the coach, acknowledge when the coach is speaking to them, and there's a little bit of vice versa with that too. Let's go back now, prep school, high school level. This is where I want to start with a few things. One is that from a societal level, we're doing a really bad job right now because we're teaching every kid that there's a left or a right or a yes or a no. Or there's only two options or two answers for every situation. And I think that at the high school level, we need to do a better job of helping kids be a little more creative in their thinking. That things are not always, sometimes they are, but they are not always black and white. When it comes to hockey and communicating, I don't know if I've ever seen a black and white situation. I mean, maybe like, hey, probably shouldn't shoot the puck in your own net. That's probably a pretty black and white topic. But when it comes to high school level coaching, and Mike, I'm going to turn to you because I know you've done a lot of that. I think it's a lot more about teaching kids, hey, calm down. You're probably very emotional right now. Let's discuss this. Let's talk about it. Tell me what you're feeling. Let's express what you're feeling and understand that there's not a right or wrong here. There's a situation that we need to discover together. Again, NCAA level should know how to do that. Mike, high school level, how do you deal with pubescent teens ready to play and ready to let you know what they think?
I don't know. Still trying to figure it.
I don't think
Still trying
anybody
to figure,
knows, Mike.
still trying to figure it out. So I think it's you know, to Pete's point, it's all about coming into it with the plan ahead of time also, right? These are not issues or concerns or philosophies that you can go in and say, you know what, today I'm going to do this. Like, these are all, you know, what is your culture? What are the norms that you've established? What are the communication lines that you've laid out? And then knowing that you're working with high schoolers and teenagers, that it's a different brain that functions differently, that, you know, there's the balance of, is mom and dad the primary communicators here, or like we all hear it, right? Oh, if a player has a problem, I want them to come to me. Well, not all players are equipped to do that by themselves, right? So maybe the process is, I want them to initiate it with mom or dad helping that, and then we're going to work together on solving the problem. It's not going to be like, I'm expecting your son to come into my locker room as an adult in my office and voice his concerns and advocate for himself. Now, that being said, that takes I think, the coaching staff laying how you'd like that communication to look. Like, of course, we want mom and dad in here. Of course, we want them helping you to learn how to communicate. If they're not going to be in the room, like, you have some parents like, no, my kid will take care of it himself. Okay, then you need to coach your son or daughter how to come into the room and what the expectation should be, and not to come into the room thinking, well, I'm going to come out with the answer I want. To Pete's point, they've got to come in with the understanding that they most likely are going to come out with an understanding of what we're telling them. That's going to be skewed by the time they get home, right? The game of telephone, right?
Well, coach said this.
How'd it go with coach? Oh, coach, he didn't tell me anything. Well, I didn't tell you nothing. I gave you specific instructions.
Yeah.
He
didn't give me the answer I wanted. That's what
you know, and the best is, like, at the high school level. Well, why isn't my son playing? Well, has your son told you he has been late for practice every day this week? Has he told you that? Oh no, we didn't hear that. Of course you didn't hear that. I know that. So it's just a matter of, you know, depending on your situation and where you're at. And if you're coaching a midget team, you know, a travel team at that level, high school kids, it's all, I think it's all about the parent and the coach and the player in that trilogy of working together to help that teenage mind work.
Right.
And it's really important that the parents take the emotional, and the coaches can both come in and take the emotional piece out,
which is hard to do, Mike.
It's extremely hard to do, because you only care, when you're a parent, you only care about your kid. You just don't care about the other kids. And, like, that's why
not as much. That's what I'll say. Not anywhere near as much.
Right. The focus is always on like, well, you know, so-and-so does that. I go, I can't worry about so-and-so. I'm worried about your son and your daughter. Those are the only people I want to have a discussion about.
And it's tough when they compare, you know, and
then, you know, well, don't you think that he can do this? And coaches do that too, right? Oh, if you would have done this like this person, I'm like, I try to stay away from that. It's hard, but you do want points of reference, right? You want like, well, listen, like, this person's being on the power play, but do you know that this person does on their own time? Do you know what this person does prior to practice? Do you know what this person does after practice? Like, a real life thing I'm dealing with right now are players trying to learn different aspects of the game of hockey, like hockey IQ stuff. And we use Huddle, and we have unlimited amounts of video that's available to players. And when I see a player that's not understanding a concept that has been presented to them multiple times, and this is where technology is a good thing, I think,
right.
Where the player can see every shift that they've ever had, they can see every circumstances they were in, and then when I look at the data and I see that player's never even logged in to look at that video, then that's a very frustrating thing for me. Like, on one hand, I don't want them on the technology all the time, but the other side is the technology we are offering them, you've got to use.
And Mike, I want to say this too. Just on the thought, I think that's actually an opportunity for communication, what you just said, right? Because, excuse me, a big part of communication is accountability, right? So to have a player come in the room and say, hey, listen, I've noticed you have never logged in the Huddle, and you're telling me this or XYZ, or we're complaining about this, or whatever that conversation is.
Right.
You're not putting the work in, and then you can open up to a larger conversation. If you don't want to put the work in at the high school level, Well, there's an outcome for that. And you got to be okay with that outcome if you're not willing to put the time in. And again, this is not a time to compare a kid to another kid, right? It's a time to teach them about accountability. Listen, my gut tells me that if you put in 3-4 hours a week on this, it's going to really improve your game. Now, are you willing to do that? That's really effective communication as a coach to a young man or woman about being accountable, right? And Pete, I'm going to throw it to you now too, because I imagine, we're talking kind of that U16, U18 level right now. That and you can comment on both as a coach, but as an NCAA coach, you're looking for these things when you're recruiting, right? The ability to be able to clearly communicate, and I'm sure that when you communicate with U16, U18 prep school coaches, high school coaches, that's one of the questions you ask, right? Well, how are they as a communicator?
Yeah, and when I would kind of hone in on players that I liked, either when I was coaching prep school or at college, one of the things I like to do was when I could, I would like to go to a practice. And one of the things I look for at the practice is when the coach called everybody in, was the player that I'm interested in engaged and looking at the board? Did they push to the front of the line so they could see themselves a little better when they took their knee, or were they, fumbling with their laces?
Did they tell their teammates to get in that weren't getting in? That's another one, right? Leadership.
But so I would look for that. The other thing I found was really fascinating, and Mike, you've got, and Lee, I think your kids are a little bit young yet, but Mike, yours have gone through that stage, I think, where when I would speak at prep schools, we normally would go to a camp or something like that, or maybe a little showcase, and we would talk to Pee Wee age players. They would sit there with the kids and their parents, and then we'd go to Bantam age kids and their parents. And the Pee Wee age kids would just, hands would be up all the time asking questions. No question was too ridiculous. Do they allow you to have carpets in your room at prep school? I still remember that one. It's in my head. Yes, you can.
That's
Then
funny.
you go to the 14-year-olds, and every one of them is sitting like this,
Right.
because something happens where it matters more that the player next to you, behind you, in front of you thinks about what you're going to say than you actually being comfortable to say it. And I like that from the standpoint of when the hands didn't go up, that's the first thing I would say. I would say, why, I see a room of really good hockey players that lack confidence. And they'd be like, I don't lack confidence. I handle that puck. I do whatever. No, you can't sit in this situation and honestly ask a question because you're afraid what the kid next to you thinks. And every one of them will give that like that little smirk, or just like your kid does when you kind of get them. Maybe like, yeah, well, they got me. So that part's really interesting. And again, back to what Mike was talking about, the parents and helping cultivate that. Like, again, like you have to be willing to cultivate that with your kids, to have those kinds of conversations with the coaches. And
Right.
like what's been said, you may not get the answer you want. And that's okay, because that's real life. You may not, support your position, find a way to communicate. And if you can actually do that, everything in life is going to get a little bit better for you. And at the end of the day, I'm going to help make you, I think, a better player, because I've helped in some small way, made you a stronger individual.
The other piece too is that because of the language you use and the verbiage we use, that it really just solidifies. You might be talking about the same thing. You might come out of the room going, "Oh my God, that's so much different perspective than I thought," because this coach is telling me like little things, like for kids, like how are you not on the strong side of that puck? Like, why did you let the weak side winger go? I didn't let the weak side winger go. I was right on him. Do you know what the weak side winger even is? No, I don't know what you're even talking about. So it's just and then a parent, like a parent might have a different understanding and definition of what that is. So sometimes having those conversations in the room in because of a negative situation becomes just a moment of clarity for everyone.
Right.
That we've got to remember that when we're speaking to children and speaking to non or established hockey parents, that our verbiage and our communication pieces need to be aligned so that we're all speaking the same language as we discuss what the players' deficiencies or expectations are.
So I'll say this too, guys. It's interesting that the points you're bringing up, kind of going again now down to the U14, U12 level. Pete, you made that really great point about that kind of that let's just like the 14, 15 age, where kids are worried about what other people think. So a couple tips for the parents out there, or those of you listening, the kids that are listening that are that age. I'm going to tell you something as a coach. I just worked with a high level tier 1 team this past weekend, that was that age. And two things: the kids that were not afraid to ask questions clearly stood out to me as the coach. I can actually see their faces in my head. So number one is, if you're willing to ask a great question, you're not worried about what the person sitting next to you is, you want to stand out a little bit to recruitment or coaches, your own coach. Ask great questions, you'll get great responses. So that's number one. Now, that's not for everybody. The other half of this is this. I know as a coach what Pete's talking about, and that, yeah, when I walked in that room, Pete was just like you described, arms crossed, kind of looking left and right. So it's on me as the coach to create an environment for them to feel comfortable sharing and communicating. So typically the first thing I do is I get them up and do an exercise where they actually can't speak, right? Hey, line up from shortest to tallest without talking, right? And what that does is it starts to break that glass a little bit of, oh, okay, we're doing something together. I actually take away their ability to speak. And then what that does is force them to, okay, we have to communicate here or do something. And like most teams, like most groups of young people, when you do an icebreaker, they come out of their shell a little bit. Oh, this is gonna be fun. We're gonna be able to talk. So on coaches to kind of create that environment, right? If you're just talking to them and they're not really listening to you, well, kind of on you a little bit, not completely, to kind of find methods to get them to listen. It's not always going to be perfect, and they're not always going to listen, and that's okay. But I wanted to make that point of that. If you're a young player, and again, when I say ask a great question, I'm not just saying talk to talk. All right. I'm saying when a coach asks a question, be the kid who's going to answer the question, or at least give a good answer, right? You will stand out. All right. From an environment standpoint that we're talking about. And again, when we're talking, I'll just make this now, we're kind of going to that U14, U12. The key words of the key phrase here, guys, that I think is the teaching point. And again, just to review, NCAA, we're expecting high levels of communication at high school level. You're refining that. You might be in a situation where you're with your parents, but you're starting to understand, hey, I got to go in the room. We have to have an effective communication. I have to report those results. When you get down to that U14, U12 level, this is my phrase. And this is what we need to teach them as coaches and parents: social etiquette. I wish there was a course in school called social etiquette, because think about it. When you're at that age, you might say anything that comes to your mind, and you might not understand, hey, you probably shouldn't say whatever comes to your mind, right? So I think it's important to talk to players when they say something or do something or text something inappropriate and say, listen, this is inappropriate. This is the key. Here's why it's inappropriate. You got to teach them that. Can't just say it's inappropriate. Here's either a better way of doing it, or here's why that's going to hurt the team or hurt yourself in the future, right? When you're 14 years old, again, they'll say anything. I'm not going to act like I have the solution to 12 to 14-year-old boys or girls and understanding anything about how to do anything at that age. But I do know social etiquette should be part of your approach. Pete, I will toss it to you.
Yeah, one of the things too that I started doing this year that I'm really kind of excited about is I started working with a local youth organization with their coaches as a kind of a mentoring thing.
That's awesome.
And it's been pretty fun because I kind of changed the way it's been done in the past. They first off, they had the term hockey director, and I said, I don't want that. I don't like the way it sounds.
Smart.
Yes, it's too hard. It's too harsh. It's like I'm telling you what to do. I said, I'm not going to go to your practices and pull you over and say, what are you doing? I'm not going to go to your games and say, you should be doing this. You shouldn't be doing that. That's not, I'm here to mentor. I'm here to help you and support you. So one thing we did that they never did before, which was crazy to me, was we have monthly coaching meetings, and they, for whatever reason, they never did that. And we'd sit, and I'd have a topic for sure, so we can get the thing going, but always we would go around the room and everyone talks about where they're at in their season, how things are going in that. So then they begin, and I love it because I don't want to sit there and talk for an hour. I want engagement. So sitting back and then all of a sudden having the squirt coach conversing with the Bantam coach, who is now sharing his thoughts with the Pee Wee coach and Mike coach, is great. So I'm really loving that and enjoying that. And then I will make the point of what's happening here amongst you as adults, even though it's not something you're purposely thinking about, is you are communicating. You are getting your points across in some ways an unfamiliar area, because the Mike coach may not know the Bantam coach and that kind of thing. So what you're doing here, let's see if we can take that as coaches to our teams as a method of communication. And everyone here feels better right now, because you feel like you're part of something, because you're engaged and you're speaking. Well, why not try to teach that to your team as well?
I love it. And I'll say this too. One of the things I see in organizations that honestly, it boggles my mind. And Mike, I'm going to throw to you for this too. I mean, this really bugs me, is when I get to an organization and the Mike coaches don't talk to the squirt coaches, and the squirt coaches don't talk to the Pee Wee coaches, and the Pee Wee don't talk to the Bantam, and so forth and so on. I don't understand how we're effectively developing players if we're not all having conversations with each other, levels above and below, about what we're looking for, what we want to teach these kids, what is the plan. I mean, you look at any effective professional hockey team, their NHL team and their AHL team are never together, but incredibly in sync if they're doing it right. They need to be prepared to move up. As a development, from a development standpoint, I remember when my son was a mite, calling the squirt coach just to say, what are you looking for from a coaching standpoint for all the kids at my son's level? What can I do on the ice to help them get better prepared for you? He was shocked that I called. All right. Now, I want to say this. You're going from Mike to squirt. I mean, think about the changes. Offsides, all of the penalties, all of the rules, 3 periods. I mean, it's a different game, literally. So I want to know what the next level coaches are looking for so I can prepare my team, right? And again, you could use this from any level. Squirt to Pee Wee, hitting comes into it from a practice standpoint. Pee Wee to Bantam, hitting's coming into the game. Bantam to midget, you're probably looking beyond. We have to communicate more. Mike, in the organizations you've worked with, is that something you've seen? And if you have, is it effective?
Yeah, I mean, well, it's certainly effective if there is open lines of communication and there's a vehicle for different levels to associate with each other. I mean, I always come at it from a youth hockey perspective that not only is it important for development, it's really important for retention, because you don't you want to. It seems like at the youth hockey level, like every year they're reinventing the organization, because very rarely do you have coaches that stay. Like, you don't usually have 10U coaches are there. They're the 10U coach. It's usually a parent that came from 8U, or maybe they're there for a year and then they go to 12U, or so having the ability to have these coaching meetings, I think it is, and I'm sure Pete, you're seeing this too with your organization. It is difficult. It's hard to ask a bunch of volunteer adults to yet again have another night to come to the rink and meet together. So you got to be creative in doing this. Like what we've done in the past is made sure that when we have coaching meeting nights, that all those sessions are covered by like a skills coach, or like there's somebody outside the organization running that night, so that the coaches can then, because 90% of our coaches are parents, right? So you have to find a way to say, listen, you're not obligated on Thursday night to come up with any kind of planning or anything. You don't even need to be on the ice. You're going to be in this other room, and we're going to work together on site or off site. And then this other piece is going to get taken care of. Now, it's amazing to me how people will fight that. Oh, no, I need that practice. I mean, do you really need that practice? Like, the kids are skating, they're stick handling, they're shooting, and we've hired a professional to come in, or the local.
They need that practice. The kids need that practice, right?
Right. So you got to be creative in doing it, because I am not a big believer in asking somebody to keep coming back to the rink and Pete's point was perfect. Like, you have to have a subject, you have to have a plan. You can't just wing it, because then you'll never get people coming back. Like, if you don't have a focused agenda of what you're doing, I'm a guy, don't send me to a meeting if you could have sent me an email about it. Like, I'm not going to go on a Zoom call if you could have just emailed me what this was. And I think it's the same way for our we talk about communication with kids. It's the same thing. Like, if you're going to have video sessions or team meetings, or have an agenda, have a plan, and then open the communication lines up by having the ability to have it back and forth with those players. It can't just be a one-way PowerPoint presentation. because you won't get them coming back. They will not be engaged. And, so for me, my biggest thing with the youth organizations is, you can either do it by age categories, like all the 10U coaches, all the 8U coaches, all the 12U coaches, or if your organization is coordinated enough to have a broader conversation about player development and player retention and the pathway in like what is the organization's way,
right?
Then you want to have people, and honestly, it does retain more players, and certainly think about the work we put into getting good coaches. It retains coaches. Make their job easier, communicate more with them, find out what their issues are, find out how you can help them. And in turn, you're going to have good coaches stay. And when good coaches stay, players stay. And with families and players are staying, your life becomes much easier. But again, it's more whatever communication you're going to do with your kids and your coaches just has to be, really focused and concise and meaningful. Don't just do it to do it. Like I see coaches all the time have video sessions that go on and on and on and on.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you're just going to watch the game? I'm like, you got to
well,
have.
And then this happened, and then
effort.
this happened, and this happened, and this. No, you should come in with a plan.
Just have a focused, and going back to technology use, like we have all these tools available to us to send kids clips, prior to them even coming into a meeting. Say, hey, these are the 5 clips we're going to talk about today. I want you to watch them, and then I'm going to ask you questions about them. I'm not going to tell you what I want you to do. I'm asking you to tell me what you should have done.
Right.
And one of the things that I really enjoy, like with this kind of a forum, this kind of a conversation, is something that has always struck me in recent years was, so in the past, if we were doing this kind of exchange, we might be talking about, and certainly it's important, the technical aspect about using your edges, your hand position, those kinds of things. Tactically, this is the forecheck you want to use. This is the rotation you use on a power play and that. And the communication, even the mental health piece, right, which kind of rolls into this a bit, is something that was just never really talked about until recent years.
Agreed.
Now it is the number one thing that every successful team has going for them if they are dealing with this in a positive way and creating the culture, the relationships, the communication. It is as important as our ability to forecheck well, our ability to skate well, because without this extra piece, third piece, not even extra piece, third piece, I'll call it, of the trilogy there, you're not going to have success. You could still be good, but you're not going to have success. And the other things too, and I'm sure you guys feel the same way as coaches. Like I want to enjoy coaching. I want to be as excited to come to the rink every day as I hope my players are excited to come to the rink every day. So being part of this, as opposed to this, Wizard of Oz guy behind the screen, pay no attention to the man behind the screen kind of thing. He's just dictating what's going on. It's gotten so much more enjoyable the last 10, 15 years, for me anyway, as a coach, to be able to do this and find with the relationships, those things. We've always gotten better because we had relationships. It wasn't just we had a bunch of guys that could play.
And Pete, you're right. That is a newer development, and not just in hockey, right? This is actually a societal development. We're seeing this in the workplace too, that the ability for everyone to have a unique understanding that, hey, we all really do care about each other. We all really are trying to do the right thing, and we all have issues, and we're all people, and we're not perfect. That's more of a modern thing. And I think it's an important thing. I wrote some notes down here about as we continually move down the age group. I'm going to open this up now that we're doing U10 and U8 and U6. But one of the keys here for me, from a communication standpoint, is to remind yourself as an adult that you can't expect the kids to be adults yet. It's on us to help them get to that point, right? And I always use the metaphor of lava, like a young kid. This is really all the way up to 18 now. I mean, it is a volcanic eruption. It is lava. It is not solid ground. If you try and step on it, you're going to sink in and get burnt. So you have to have some patience. You have to let it cool. You got to let it turn. But you can motivate it to go a certain direction, right? You can harness that lava to where you need it to be. So when you get down to the U10 and the U8 level, What's always funny to me, Pete, about what you just said is, again, and we're starting to learn this is not true. Oh, you can't do that stuff with them. You can't do the mental stuff with them. They are better at it than most of the older kids. All right. And here's the key. Again, U10, U8. A lot of his basic communication methodology, right? I'll start with the mites. Hey, I'm speaking. I need you to look at me when I'm speaking. I can tell you right now, if you're on a mite bench and you're talking to the kids, they're looking at the ice, they're looking at everything but you, because that's what kids do at that age. They're trained not to look at the adult. So I will sit there and very calmly, eyes on me, coach is speaking. I've even told the mites, this is not Adams. You have a coach now, you have a staff, and you need to give us respect, and we give you the respect of listening when you have questions. But down to that level, I am speaking, eyes on me. And then also, and this is a mistake I see a lot at the younger ages, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this. And you could apply this to squirt a bit too, but it's what much more might is over communicating. I want you to do this and this and this and this and this. An 8-year-old can handle about 2 things per game. All right. And usually those 2 things, by the way, are, hey, let's keep your feet moving. And when the puck's on your stick, let's skate with it a little bit. Let's not just whack it away. Right. And you got to be patient. It's going to take them half a season, most likely, to get some of these things down. You move up to the squirt level, do this, do this, do this, do this. No, you're developing an early hockey player. Let's figure out onsides first. Let's understand what it is to break out. Let's understand all of the positions, defense, forward, goaltender. You should still be doing that at the squirt level. So you're a teacher at every age you coach. Don't get me wrong. But I have spoken to elementary school teachers to get advice of how do you teach these kids at this age? How do you get them to listen and communicate? Right. And again, there's a tremendous amount of patience. We have all had the kid who tells us the 27-minute story that just keeps going and going and going. And you have to know how to, okay, let's hone it in. It's not easy, right? You don't just have time for it. And then the other side of it, guys, is the behavior you exude as an adult to that child. I said this early in the episode. Are you on your phone while they're talking to you? Are you not looking them in the eye when they're talking to you? Are you not coming down to their level and meeting them where they're at when they're speaking to you? So this is a 2-way street of teaching communication. And again, it's not just hockey. And again, I'm sure all of you have a story about this. When we are in a restaurant and we are ordering food, my children will look the hostess or the host in the eye when they order their food. We will tell them, put down the tablet, put down whatever you're doing, look them in the eye and order your food. And they do it. It's not hard. They do it, right? So baseline communication, look at someone when you're speaking to them, give them the respect of putting down the device that you're on. If you're on one, just do your best. And if it's not great, that's okay. We'll try it again. You can see how that's going to translate to the older levels and how the older levels translate to the above levels. But let's just talk about squirt and mite and Adams. And maybe a little bit too about the expectation of that level, because it is hurting cats sometimes. Right. But Pete, to your point, when you walk into the locker room knowing that you're going to be hurting cats, it's much more enjoyable than when you walk in and be like, why won't you kids listen to me? Why won't you 7-year-old kids listen to me? It's not, some nights that's not going to happen.
No, for sure. And one of the things I used to do, and as we're talking here, comes back to mind. I think back, this was 30 years ago, but 30 years ago when I was coaching a squirt team, and I had 2 rules when you hit something that I call double numbers. So as soon as you became 10 years old, there were 2 things that you did. One of them was you tied your own skates.
Ooh, I love that.
Now,
Parents love that.
If you struggle with it, we'll always help you. Right. But the goal by the end of the season is every one of you ties their own skates. And yes, you're right. The parents love that. They love the other one was, and this was a communication thing even back then. I was thinking about it because that was back when we had something called a landline, which is pretty much gone a thing of the past. If someone has it, it's probably covered with dust.
You brought up payphones before, man. You're dating yourself today, but
that's okay. Yeah. Listen, if you knew what it took to get here to lose all this hair and such, don't you worry. I'm happy with it. If you weren't going to come to practice or you weren't going to be able to make a game, you called me. Now, mom and dad could help you dial.
Right.
But you were the one that was talking to me on the phone. And my wife thought it was the funniest thing in the world because the phone would ring and she'd pick it up and she'd say, I think it's somebody from Disney. because the kids all had those little high pitched squeaky
Right.
voices. But the kids would always call me, and they were the ones that said, "Coach, I can't come to practice. What's going on?" And it was, I think it was really good for some of them, because you would get things like, "Yeah, I didn't do my homework," or "I got in trouble at school today," or "My little sister is sick and mom has to stay home with her and we only have the one car," whatever it may be. But I always felt good that hopefully somewhere that carried through as a communication skill, that they were advocating for themselves. It's not, I don't think that's too early to do that. I think it's safe. The parents know what's happening and they're part of it. So
Well, Pete, let me ask you this too. My guess is the first time they had to do that might have been really hard for them and really scary. And maybe the parent had to really push them to do it. But once they do it once, maybe twice, it's not hard. Like, because you've done it, you've gotten over the hump, you got over the fear. And I think what's happening now from a society standpoint is we're waiting later and later and later to teach our kids that. Or again, I don't have a problem with texting, but we rely on that to the point we're not having people talk anymore. Right. But am I right? Like the one or two times after they do that, it wasn't hard for them to do that anymore.
No, and I would have parents tell me, "You know what? I was going to call you, but he or she wouldn't let me."
That's
They
awesome.
said they got to do it.
Yeah.
And so you hear that and you're like, "This is great. This is awesome." But again, like you say, it's become too easy to not do that. That's part of it. And that's the hard part, is just because it's available, is it the best thing in every situation? Sometimes yes, but also sometimes no. And that's the hard part, I think that's probably the hardest part about parenting. Like I look at my own kids, with their children, and I honestly think it was easier for me to parent than it is for them today.
It might be. And I'll tell you, it's funny you mentioned this. I had a player, squirt player, FaceTime me the other day to tell me something, which I thought was really amazing that he thought to do that. The other point you're making that is really good about texting, and there's a time and a place. We talked about social etiquette, right? So, and Mike, you're gonna love this one. If you're gonna miss a game, I better not get a text of, "Hey, coach, can't make it tonight." All right, that would enrage me. Right now, look, I might accept something. "Coach, here's what happened. I'm going to have a really hard time making the game tonight," in text, but preferably give me a call. I mean, I think that deserves a call of, "I'm not going to make my commitment tonight. I'd like to explain to you why." Right? Mike is smiling. If you're listening to this, Mike has got a look on his face that is priceless right now. Yeah. He's shaking his head. He could be a meme right now or a GIF. Mike, your thoughts?
Well, it's evolved to, "Hey, I'm not going to be here for this and this, but I'll make it for this and this." I'm like, what the hell is that?
Yeah.
When did that happen?
It was secretary.
When did it happen where you're telling me when you're coming and not coming? I don't know when that transition happened, but just as far as the communication piece, it's really just, I mean, I think at any age, because Pete, right, we see this at the college level, like you can't have a 10-point bullet on the wall. Like, these are the 10 things we're going to focus on today. It's always 2-3 things. Like, focus on this, this, and this. And if you're going to a 10U game, and you say, and one of the 3 things is, "We love you and have fun today," like that's a bonus. If you're a coach that goes in and gives a 25-minute pregame talk on how you're going to play the game, there's zero chance that any kid in that locker room has taken any of that information in.
Right.
They're just not. And that's when
if they're listening in the first place.
Yeah, that's when you're really losing. That's whether they have a phone or not. Like, they don't need a phone to be droned out. I think it's just a matter of just saying, "Listen, you just come in, just don't remember, remember this, this, and this." The earlier, the younger the ages, the more broad those things are. Work hard, you win battles, have fun. And then at the college level, it's it's going to be like, "Hey, maintain our system, stay out of the box,
right,
and get pucks on net." Whatever, just the little things that you could listen to any pregame talk in any NHL locker room. They're all the same. They're all points of emphasis that are pinpointed to maybe the focus of that game. There's nobody going in going, "Okay, here's what I'm going to do. Between the first and second period, or at the end of the period, we're going to focus on our left wing lock and making sure the guys are coming through the end zone, and then curling up and pulling up and make sure that the high guys in the 1-3-1 and this guy," all that kind of stuff that's what practice is for.
Well,
that's
and
what
Mike, let me make this point too. And Pete, I know you want to say something also. Look, I've always said this. There's a difference between armchair coaches and real coaches, right? An armchair coach will come in and say, here's everything that I see and is wrong with this team. I could fix this team in an instant because these 10 things are so obvious. That's the easy part of coaching.
Yeah, we all see it.
We all can walk in and see a team and say, okay, if they fix these 10 things, right, they're going to be a great team. It's like, yeah, no crap, right? The coaching, the art of coaching is to look at those 10 things, break them down, look at them from a season, and then understand from a prioritization point, this is how we have to craft our practices and our games to slowly go towards accomplishing as much of this list, because you might not get all of it, as possible throughout the season. That's a huge part of coaching. So for all the NHL fans out there that are watching hockey and know how to fix the team, you probably aren't wrong, to be fair, right? But that's just not enough, right? That's just not enough. It's so much deeper than that. And in all the age groups we're talking, creating the environment and then being realistic. Again, the expectation at the NCAA level is not the same at a mite level. At a mite level, I just want them smiling and skating, right? And understanding that this is fun, right? You guys will laugh at this, but we had a game last night and wasn't really going great. And I realized halfway through the second period, we were giving them 2 pretty easy actionable items, but they weren't really there. So I just started talking in a Mickey Mouse voice, and it was amazing. They perked up immediately. Like that was a voice of authority, right? And I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to do it now, but I do a pretty good Mickey Mouse impression. All right. And you know what I did, guys? I basically met them where they were at, and we had fun the rest of the game. And I was saying things that they knew, and it worked. You got to, I'm not suggesting that all of you go out there and find a great Mickey Mouse impression. My point is you got to find methods to get through to these people, to coach them. Just going on the ice into a mite team, guys, if we could fix the breakout, we'd be great. No shit. Like, that's every team that ever existed, right? You can't expect a mite team to do that right away. All right. They got to be able to move. Anyway, I'm going to start ranting. Pete?
Yeah, and finding a way to communicate with that. It's funny you mentioned it. You kind of reminded me of something when I coached prep school. I remember the first time I brought my iPad onto the bench. Right. So the iPad had the app, right? That was a rink, and you could draw and move things around with your fingers, right?
Right.
When you had a coach's board, guys would sort of turn and look, and half of them would sort of turn and look away. But when you had an iPad, and you could draw with your finger,
wow,
it was like you were telling them that night's lottery ticket winner, because everyone was engaged, because technology was what they were focusing in on. So finding a way, like you just said, to reach your players. That's all you did with that. You found a way to reach your players. So that reminded me of that. And then the other thing too, with the whole thing about communication and point you brought up about conversation,
right,
still strikes me at the college level, which means along at the lower levels, again, something parents, if you're listening, work on this piece. Because maybe I'd see a player at team dinner, they'd look a little off to me for some reason. Maybe they're a little quiet, just didn't see themselves. So I talked to another player who I knew was close to them, say, hey, what's going on with so-and-so today? They seemed a little down. Yeah, I talked to them, and it was this and this. And I said, so you talked to them, right? Well, I texted them. Yeah, I texted them. You didn't have a conversation with them. So there was no emotion here. So if I'm sitting with you and I'm having a conversation and I'm making eye contact with you and I'm really listening to you, that goes a lot farther than the fact that you send them a text. Oh man, that stinks. I'm sorry to hear that.
Or you okay? ?
Yes, you okay? And then you get a thumbs up back. Like there's nothing there. So, but so curious that at that age still, where they're young men, they think that is actual communication. It is a form of communication, but is it, again, the most effective communication? Probably not. Face-to-face verbal is still going to be, I don't care what technology they come up with, is still going to be the best form of communication, because there is emotion and actual human
connection. Yeah, we just echoed each other there, right? Again, that's a big part of communication. There is a difference between hearing and listening. right? There's a difference between speaking and waiting for your turn to speak, right? To truly give someone real attention and have them know, and this is every age group, that, hey, I'm listening, I hear you, and I want to know what you think, and I want you to listen to me. That is something that is deteriorating slowly, but I think we can get back. All right. And I think it starts with all of us from the young ages all the way through. I think it also takes some patience and understanding. You got to remove some of the ego from the situation. You know, again, using mites as an example, I expect them not to look at me, and I don't think that the words coming out of my mouth are gold. All right. I expect that I'm going to have to tell them for weeks or months, I need you to look at me when I speak. Here's the message. I know you're probably going to do it or not going to do it, and I'm okay with that. And I think when you get to the higher levels, I think there is a clear expectation that you will listen to what the coaches say and you will understand what the coaches say, right? But even as coaches at high levels, there's got to be a level of patience with the ability for players to learn. Now, again, I think when you get, just rounding this whole thing out, when you get to the professional level, there's an expectation you're going to learn quickly, and if you don't, you're going to get sent down. Right. But there's ways to communicate at that level as well. And I think that the best teams right now, the teams that are winning the Stanley Cup, especially the last few years, and let's end it on this one, guys, there is such a clear family atmosphere. Communication is at the highest levels possible, right? These teams don't sacrifice that. They take it very, very seriously, right? And I think that if you want to succeed really in anything, I'm not just talking hockey, you have to understand how to have high levels of trust and great communication. Mike, I say it all the time, 10 out of 10 problems have poor or bad communication on some level. I have never seen a problem arise where communication did not play a role in the problem existing, right? Whether it's too much or lack of, or just poor ways of communicating.
Yeah, no,
So,
it's the keys to all of us. Like, it's just having that information out there, and using shared calendars and making sure that people, using these apps to our advantage of making sure that, there's not missteps and miscommunication in timing and scheduling and expectations. All this stuff could be done very generically, and there's not a lot of reasons for coaches not to take advantage of this stuff.
So, Pete, I'm going to give you the final word before I close this episode out, but I really have enjoyed this episode. And I think that it's important to understand too, that, we always say it takes a village, right? It takes a village to raise a young person. I think this episode is just another great example. We're using communication as the guide, but it takes a village. We all play a role in this: coaches, parents, the kids themselves, into developing young people into more effective communicators, and in turn, adults into better communicators as well.
Yeah, and I think to what you said, you mentioned the word ego. And to me, the most successful coaches I've ever known are the coaches that don't have, I mean, we all have an ego for sure, but
Absolutely.
don't make that ever an issue. Right. And that's just, and if you can do that as a coach, as you're talking to a player, and that player, you can both check your egos at the door and have an honest communication and just respect each other's opinion. Again, agreeing to disagree if that's the way it goes. You will be successful as a coach, more successful as a coach, because to me, ego is simply a defense mechanism used by an individual so that they do not have to deal with a confrontation.
Well, I love the way you put that.
Right.
You've just given birth to another episode topic that we'll have you back for. This is why we like having you on, because there's always another topic after the topic that we discussed. But Pete, that's a great way to end this on. Guys, again, wonderful discussion. For those of you listening, hope you took as much value out of that as we did, because that was another great episode of Our Kids Play Hockey. And guess what? All of the episodes, as you know, available wherever you can listen to podcasts, or ourkidsplayhockey.com. And if you are enjoying these, we always ask you, share these episodes with your other families, with your friends, with your kids, with your coaches. Help us build that community that really every day is growing. I mean, we're amazed at the growth of the Our Kids Play Hockey community, both listenership, watching, and also our Facebook page, Our Kids Play Hockey, which we always ask you all to join. So for Pete Whitney, for Mike Benelli, I'm Lee Elias. Thanks for listening to this edition of Our Kids Play Hockey. We'll see you next week. Have a wonderful, everybody. Have a wonderful one, everybody. There it is. Skate on. It was good. Bye, guys. Sorry, I just saw the time and I'm like, oh, we got to... We hope you enjoyed this edition of Our Kids Play Hockey. Make sure to like and subscribe right now if you found value wherever you're listening, whether it's a podcast network, a social media network, or our website, ourkidsplayhockey.com. Also, make sure to check out our children's book, When Hockey Stops, at whenhockeystops.com. It's a book that helps children deal with adversity in the game and in life. We're very proud of it. But thanks so much for listening to this edition of Our Kids Play Hockey, and we'll see you on the next episode.